Sophie Cunningham just went down screaming in pain, and her family is absolutely furious. What happened next will shock you. Kelsey Mitchell dropped 38 points to save the Indiana Fever's season, but at what cost? The Fever barely survived overtime against the worst team in the league, and now their playoff hopes might be shattered. But wait until you hear what Sophie's mother and sister said about the player who took her out. This is about to get explosive. If you're enjoying this breakdown of the craziest game of the season, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more exclusive WNBA coverage. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next in this wild story. Picture this. Second quarter, Mohegan Sun Arena, Sophie Cunningham is playing her heart out for the Indiana Fever. Bria Hartley drives to the basket, loses her balance, and crashes directly into Sophie's right knee. The sound was sickening. Sophie immediately grabbed her knee, hopping on one leg before collapsing to the floor in agony. The entire arena went silent. Players from both teams stopped in their tracks. Sophie had to be helped off the court with a towel over her head, unable to put any weight on that right leg. 0 points, 3 missed shots, 1 rebound. That's all she managed before disaster struck. But here's where things get absolutely wild. Sophie's family wasn't having any of it. Her sister Lindsay went straight for the WNBA's throat on social media. And I quote, "Maybe you should focus less on finding players for commenting on your poor officiating and more about hiring officials that are able to call a consistent game and protect your athletes." Pathetic! Praying for you, Sophie. That's not even the most savage part. Sophie's mother Paula didn't hold back either. She called out Bria Hartley directly, saying, "Hartley is a disgruntled player having trouble everywhere she goes. She's plain mean and plays out of control. When a mother gets involved, you know it's serious." Let's talk about who Sophie Cunningham really is, because this isn't just any player we're discussing. This woman earned a black belt in Taekwondo at 6 years old. 6! She grew up on a 2,500-acre farm in Missouri, riding horses and playing basketball on a driveway so steep they had to argue about whether shots hit the white brick above the garage. Her grandmother would make her throw softballs at lawn chairs for accuracy training. If she missed, she had to chase that ball down the hill. This is a warrior we're talking about, someone who even kicked field goals for her high school football team when their kicker tore his ACL. Sophie Cunningham doesn't go down easy, which makes this injury even more concerning. Now here's what makes this whole situation even more insane. The Indiana Fever were getting absolutely destroyed. Down by 21 points to the Connecticut Sun, who have won just 6 games all season. 6-27 record. The Fever looked like they were about to suffer the most embarrassing loss of their season. Stephanie White's coaching decisions were being questioned left and right. Players were out of position, the offense was stagnant, and it looked like a complete disaster. But then something extraordinary happened. Kelsey Mitchell decided she wasn't going to let this team lose. Not on her watch. Not with Sophie down, not with Caitlin Clark still out with that groin injury that's kept her sidelined for 13 straight games. Mitchell went absolutely nuclear in that second half. 34 of her 38 points came after halftime. Think about that for a second. She scored more points in one half than most players score in an entire game. The fourth quarter was pure magic. Mitchell was hitting shots from everywhere. Pull-up jumpers, contested threes, drives to the basket. She converted a 3-point play with 44 seconds left to tie the game at 82. The crowd couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Marina Mabrey had 27 for Connecticut. Tina Charles added 21, but none of it mattered because Kelsey Mitchell was on a mission. In overtime, Mitchell took over completely. She scored the Fever's first 10 points of the extra period, back-to-back 3-pointers that silenced the Connecticut crowd. Then Lexi Hull, who'd been struggling all game, hit the dagger 3 with 44 seconds left to seal it. 99-93, the largest comeback in franchise history. 21 points down, and they won in overtime. But let's be real about what this means. The Fever are now 19-16, barely holding on to that 7th seed. They've got Seattle and Los Angeles breathing down their necks. Without Sophie Cunningham, without Caitlin Clark, without Sydney Colson who tore her ACL, without Ari McDonald who broke her foot, this team is running on fumes. They're literally down to 9 healthy players. Here's what nobody's talking about though. Jason Whitlock, during the actual game broadcast, tweeted, "Sophie Cunningham's injury signals the official start of football season, nightmare season, fire Stephanie White." Even Whitlock, who's been defending White for weeks, has finally had enough. He's not alone either. Fans are absolutely destroying White on social media. The rotations make no sense, the offensive system doesn't utilize the player's strengths, And now with all these injuries, her inability to adjust is being exposed. Let me break down just how bad this injury crisis really is. Caitlin Clark has missed 20-plus games total this season with multiple injuries. 2 hamstring injuries early on, now this groin issue that won't go away. She was doing full court running last week, but still hasn't returned to practice. ESPN's latest update says maybe August 26th against Seattle, but that's not guaranteed. Sydney Colson is done for the year with a torn ACL. Harry McDonald is done for the year with a broken foot. Now, Sophie might have torn her ACL too. We're waiting on MRI results, but the way she went down, the way she couldn't put weight on it, it doesn't look good. Stephanie White was asked about the injuries after the game, and her response was telling. "We came in at halftime, we talked about chipping away, being resilient. That's kind of been our story this entire season. Resilient? They needed overtime to beat a 6-27 team. They were down 21 points to the worst team in the league. If Kelsey Mitchell doesn't go supernova, they lose by 30. Speaking of Mitchell, she was asked about carrying the team, and she just shrugged. Someone had to do it, she said. That's the kind of player she is. No ego, just results. But how long can one player carry an entire franchise? She's averaging over 25 points per game since Clark went down, but she can't do this every night. The wear and tear is going to catch up. Natasha Howard tried to help, finishing with 18 points and 9 rebounds. Aaliyah Boston had 14 and 13, a solid double-double, but she's been inconsistent lately. There are games where she looks like an all-star, then games where she disappears. Part of that is coaching. White isn't putting her in positions to succeed consistently. Odyssey Sims, who they just signed to a hardship contract, had 19 points and 7 assists. Not bad for someone who wasn't even on a roster 3 weeks ago. But the fact that they're relying on emergency signings tells you everything about this season. Chloe Bibby got 7 minutes and went scoreless. White's been burying her on the bench despite the fact that she can shoot, and they desperately need spacing. The Connecticut Sun aren't even trying to win games at this point. They're basically tanking for draft position. Marina Mabrey is playing well individually, but the team has no chemistry, no system, nothing. The fact that they almost beat Indiana tells you more about the Fever's problems than the Sun's competence. Here's what's really concerning. The Fever's remaining schedule is brutal. They've got Minnesota twice, who are fighting for the #1 seed. They've got New York, Las Vegas, Phoenix, all playoff teams playing their best basketball right now. Without their starting backcourt, without depth, without a coach who can make adjustments, how are they supposed to compete? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Stephanie White's job security. She came in with all this hype. Local hero returning home, WNBA champion as a player, successful stint with Connecticut. But the results haven't been there. Yes, they've had injuries, but good coaches find ways to win regardless. Look at what Becky Hammon's doing in Vegas with half her roster hurt. Look at what Cheryl Miller did in Los Angeles with a rebuilding team. White's offensive system is outdated. She wants to run this motion offense that requires all 5 players to be threats, but when you're down to your 3rd-string guards, that doesn't work. She refuses to simplify things, refuses to just give the ball to your best players and let them create. That's why Mitchell had to go rogue in the second half. She stopped running the plays and just started hooping. The defensive schemes are even worse. They were switching everything in the first half, which led to Anissa Morrow posting up guards in the paint. Connecticut had a rookie point guard, Layla Lacan, dishing out 14 assists because the Fever's defensive rotations were so predictable. You can't win in this league playing defense like it's 2010. Now, about Sophie's injury specifically. The way Hartley fell into her knee looked bad, but was it intentional? Sophie's family clearly thinks there was something dirty about it. Hartley has a reputation for playing on the edge, sometimes crossing the line. She's been in altercations before, been called for flagrant fouls. But in this case, it looked more reckless than malicious. Still, when you're playing out of control and someone gets hurt, you bear responsibility. The WNBA needs to address this officiating crisis. Players are getting hurt because refs aren't calling games consistently. One quarter, it's prison rules. The next quarter, they're calling touch fouls. Players don't know how physical they can be, so they're either holding back or going too hard. Sophie's been fined twice this season for criticizing officials, and now she's potentially out for the year after a play that should have been called differently. Sophie tweeted after the game, even while dealing with the injury. All she wrote was, "Kelsey freaking Mitchell," in all caps. That's the kind of teammate she is, thinking about others even when she's in pain. That's the culture the Fever are trying to build, but it's hard when you can't keep anyone healthy. Let me give you some perspective on what Mitchell just did. 38 points ties her career high. 34 in the second half is the most any WNBA player has scored in a half this season. She shot 11 of 22 from the field, 5 of 8 from 3, 11 of 12 from the free throw line. Those aren't just good numbers, those are legendary numbers. This performance will go down in Fever history. But here's the thing about Mitchell. She's been doing this all season with no recognition. She's not an all-star this year, wasn't even in the conversation. Meanwhile, players putting up worse numbers on better teams get all the attention. It's criminal how underrated she is. Without her, the Fever would be in last place right now. The comeback itself was historic. WNBA teams were 29 and 1,722 all-time when trailing by 20 or more points. The Fever just became the 30th team to pull it off. Think about those odds. Less than 2% chance of winning, and they did it without their best player, without their enforcer, against a team that had nothing to lose. Aaliyah Boston stepped up when it mattered most. That short jumper to force overtime was clutch. She's been criticized all season for being too passive, for not demanding the ball enough. But in that moment, she delivered. Maybe this game will be a turning point for her confidence. Lexi Hull has been in a shooting slump for weeks. She was 0 for 5 before hitting that corner 3 in overtime. The fact that she had the confidence to take that shot and that Mitchell trusted her enough to pass it says something about this team's character. They don't quit on each other, but character only gets you so far. At some point, talent and health matter. The Fever are running out of both. They can't keep asking Mitchell to score 40 every night. They can't keep playing 9 players 30-plus minutes. Something's got to give. The timeline for Clark's return keeps getting pushed back. First it was early August, then mid-August, now maybe late August. The team says they're being cautious, which makes sense given her injury history this season, but every game she misses is a game they're playing with fire. One bad loss, and they could fall out of the playoff picture entirely. Here's what I think is really happening. Clark's injury is worse than they're letting on. Groin injuries are tricky, especially for a player whose game relies on quick cuts and explosive movements. If she comes back too soon and re-injures it, her season is over. But if she waits too long, the team might not make the playoffs anyway. Sophie's potential ACL tear would be devastating. She was having a career year, shooting over 40% from 3, providing veteran leadership, being the enforcer the team desperately needed. Without her, who protects Clark when she comes back? Who stands up to the physical play from teams like Connecticut and Chicago? The Fever organization needs to make some hard decisions. If Sophie is out for the season, do they shut down Clark too and focus on next year? Do they fire White now and try to salvage the season with an interim coach? Do they make a trade to get some guard depth? Time is running out to make these choices. What's frustrating is that this team has so much potential. When healthy, a lineup of Clark, Mitchell, Sophie, Natasha Howard, and Boston can compete with anyone. They proved that early in the season when they beat New York and gave Vegas tough games. But when healthy has been a fantasy all year, the medical staff has to be questioned too. How do you have this many soft tissue injuries? Is it the training regimen, the practice intensity, the lack of proper rest and recovery? Other teams aren't dealing with this level of injury crisis. Something in the organization's approach to player health needs to change. Back to the game itself. Credit to Connecticut for fighting. Marina Mabrey has been their bright spot all season. 27 points on efficient shooting, 5 assists, playing with pride despite the team's record. She deserves better than this Sun roster. Tina Charles, at her age, is still putting up 21 and 11. That's a Hall of Fame career right there. But they still lost. Because when Kelsey Mitchell is in that zone, nobody can stop her. She was seeing the rim like it was the size of a swimming pool. Every shot looked good from the moment it left her hands. The Connecticut defense tried everything. Double teams, switching, zone, nothing worked. The overtime period was a masterclass. Mitchell scored 10 straight for Indiana. Not just scoring, but taking smart shots, using the clock, keeping Connecticut off balance. Then when they finally started focusing entirely on her, she found Hull in the corner. That's basketball IQ. That's what separates good players from great ones. Stephanie White, to her credit, just got out of the way. She stopped calling plays, stopped micromanaging, and let Mitchell cook. Sometimes the best coaching decision is to not coach, but the fact that it took being down 21 for her to figure that out is concerning. The crowd at Mohegan Sun Arena was sparse, maybe 3,000 people. That's what happens when your team is 6 and 27. But those who were there witnessed history. They saw one of the great individual performances in WNBA history, even if it came against their team. Post-game, the Fever locker room was subdued. Yes, they won, but at what cost? Sophie's injury cast a shadow over everything. Players were checking their phones for updates, hoping for good news about the MRI. The celebration felt hollow. Natasha Howard spoke to the media about the team's resilience. "We've been fighting through adversity all season. Losing Sophie hurts, but we're not going to fold. We owe it to her, to CC, to everyone who's injured to keep pushing. That's the right mindset, but reality might be different. The playoff race in the East is tight. Washington is surging. Chicago is playing better. Atlanta has been competitive. Any of those teams could catch Indiana if the Fever stumble. And with this roster, stumbling seems likely. Here's my prediction. Unless Clark comes back by August 22nd and is at least 80% healthy, the Fever miss the playoffs. They simply don't have enough firepower to survive this schedule. Mitchell can't do it alone, and asking her to try will only lead to her breaking down too. The franchise is at a crossroads. They have the most popular player in the league in Clark, they have a legitimate all-star in Mitchell, they have young talent in Boston, but they also have an injured roster, a coach on the hot seat, and a fan base that's running out of patience. Sophie Cunningham deserves better than this. She came to Indiana to win, to be part of something special. Instead, she's looking at potential knee surgery and months of rehab. Her family's anger is justified. The league does need to protect its players better. The officiating has been a joke all season. Players are getting fined for pointing it out, but nothing changes. Sophie's been fined twice, Clark's been fined, even coaches are getting fined. Meanwhile, the refs keep missing calls, keep letting dangerous play go unpunished, and players keep getting hurt. This game should be a wake-up call for everyone involved. The Fever nearly lost to a tanking team despite one of the best individual performances of the season. That's not sustainable. Changes need to be made, and they need to be made now. As for Kelsey Mitchell, she deserves every accolade, every award, every bit of recognition she can get. 38 points to save the season, 34 in one half. The largest comeback in franchise history. Put her jersey in the rafters right now. But one player can't carry a franchise. The Fever need Clark back, they need Sophie healthy, they need depth, they need better coaching, they need luck. Right now they don't have any of those things. The season is slipping away, and that overtime victory might just be delaying the inevitable. So what's next for Indiana? They host Minnesota on Friday, another tough game against a playoff team. Without Sophie, possibly without Clark again, asking Mitchell to repeat this performance. It's unfair, it's unsustainable, but it's their reality. The MRI results on Sophie's knee should come Monday. If it's an ACL, she's done for the year and probably misses half of next season too. If it's just a sprain, maybe she's back in a few weeks. But watching that replay, seeing how she couldn't put weight on it, I'm preparing for the worst. This team was supposed to contend for a championship. They had all the pieces, all the talent, all the momentum from last year. Instead, they're fighting just to make the playoffs, dealing with injury after injury, and watching their season fall apart in real time. Stephanie White's post-game press conference was telling. She looked exhausted, defeated even in victory. When asked about Sophie's injury, she just shook her head. When asked about Clark's return, she gave the same non-answer she's been giving for weeks. The pressure is clearly getting to her. The players are trying to stay positive, but you can see the wear on their faces. They're tired, they're frustrated, they're running on empty. Mitchell looked like she could barely stand after the game. Boston was icing both knees. Howard was getting her ankle wrapped. This team is held together with tape and prayers. But they won. Somehow, some way, they won. The largest comeback in franchise history. Kelsey Mitchell playing like a woman possessed. Lexi Hull hitting the biggest shot of her career. Aaliyah Boston coming through in the clutch. It wasn't pretty, but it counted. The question now is whether this victory means anything. Did it save their season or just postpone the inevitable? Can they build on this momentum or will they come crashing back down? Without Sophie, without Clark, the odds are against them. One thing's for sure, Kelsey Mitchell won't stop fighting. She's the heart and soul of this team right now. 38 points to save the season. That's the kind of performance that defines careers, that gets remembered forever. Whatever happens next, Mitchell proved she's a superstar. The Fever have 9 games left in the regular season, 9 games to figure it out, to get healthy, to make the playoffs. It seems impossible given everything they're dealing with, but if tonight proved anything, It's that impossible things can happen. Sophie Cunningham will be watching from the sidelines, probably on crutches, definitely in pain, but still supporting her teammates. That's the kind of player she is, the kind of person she is. The Fever need more like her, and losing her might be the final blow to their season. So, where does Indiana go from here? Do they rush Clark back and risk further injury? Do they continue riding Mitchell until she breaks? Do they make a desperation trade for guard depth? Every option seems risky, every path fraught with danger. The honest truth is this season might already be over. Too many injuries, too much instability, too many problems to overcome. But as long as there's a mathematical chance, as long as Mitchell can suit up, as long as there's fight left in this team, they'll keep pushing. That's what makes sports beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The Fever just pulled off a miracle comeback, but it might not matter. They just witnessed an all-time great performance, but it might not be enough. They're still alive, but barely breathing. Sophie Cunningham's injury might be the story that defines this season. Not the comebacks, not the highlights, but the moment everything truly fell apart. Her family's anger reflects what every Fever fan is feeling: frustration, disappointment, and a sense that this season has been cursed from the start. But until they're mathematically eliminated, until the final buzzer sounds on their season, there's hope. Kelsey Mitchell gave them that tonight. 38 points worth of hope. The largest comeback in franchise history worth of hope. It might not be enough, but it's something. The Indiana Fever aren't dead yet. They're injured, they're struggling, they're hanging by a thread, but they're not dead. And as long as they're still breathing, as long as Mitchell keeps shooting, as long as there's fight left, anything can happen. But make no mistake, this team needs a miracle. They need Clark back healthy, they need Sophie's MRI to come back negative, they need Mitchell to keep playing at an MVP level, they need White to figure out her rotations, they need everything to go right from here on out. The odds are stacked against them. The schedule is brutal, the injuries are mounting, the pressure is building. This overtime victory over the worst team in the league feels more like a stay of execution than a triumph. But sometimes, that's all you need to keep going. If you've been following this wild Indiana Fever season, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because things are about to get even crazier. Comment below with your thoughts on Sophie's injury and whether you think the Fever can still make the playoffs. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the WNBA, anything can happen and usually does.